Okay, let's continue our NRL records series. We're now looking at the Canberra Raiders. We've just obviously done the Brisbane Broncos, and a handful of players dominate their individual records, and some of their club records are absolutely fantastic as well. So their biggest win is a 68-0 versus the Parramatta Eels on the 22nd of August 1993. On their way to their last premiership. Their biggest loss comes as a 68-4 versus the Melbourne Storm on the 4th of August 2013. That's a bit of a downer, but every club has a defeat like that. And against the Melbourne Storm at that point, Melbourne Storm were doing that to a lot of clubs. So when we get to the Melbourne video, that's going to be really interesting looking at some of their records, because they've got some fantastic records themselves. Their highest attendance at home is 26,567 at GIO Stadium. That was against the South Sydney Rabbitohs on the 27th of September 2019 on their way to their most recent grand final. Most games. Now, this record is going to continue to be set by Big Papa Josh Papali'i. He currently has 319 games for the club between 2011 and now. Depending on how far the Raiders go into the finals, for example, because they are playing really well right now. They're second overall as I'm recording this video on the 14th of June 2025. We're looking potentially at somewhere around 330 if he stays fit and plays the majority of the games for the rest of the season, and depending on how far they get into the finals, for example, if the season stopped now, they would definitely be a top four side. So look for that record to continue to tumble. He just overtook Jared Croker, who holds quite a few individual records for the club. So Jared Croker has the most points overall for the Raiders at 2,374. He set that record between 2009 and 2023. I don't think that club record for points gets broken anytime soon. There are no players currently on the Raiders roster that I think will get close to that. It's also amazing that Jared Croker never played Origin. That's one thing that always surprises me. But that is his points record for the club. Did it all one club man. Most tries, again, Jared Croker, 136. Most tries in a match, obviously the great Mal Meninga has to hold this record. He scored 5 against the Roosters on the 15th of April 1990. The most goals kicked in a match. Now, remember that biggest win over the Parramatta Eels on the 22nd of August 93? Well, David Furner kicked 10 goals in that match. And then Terry Campese equalled that record versus the Panthers on the 10th of August 2008. It's no surprise that Mal Meninga holds the most points in a match for an individual player at 38 versus the Roosters back on the 15th of April 1990. He scored 5 tries in that game, kicked a load of goals, scored 38 points in total against the Roosters back in 1990. The most tries in a season is 23, held by Jordan Rapana. That took place in the 2016 season on their way to the semi-final, where they would ultimately lose to the Cronulla Sharks on the way to Cronulla's first and only premiership. That same season, Jared Croker scored 296 points. That is a ridiculous record. I said Jared Croker is one of those handful of players that dominates the individual records. Jared Croker really dominates a lot of the individual records for the Canberra Raiders. 296 points in a season is one of the best seasons a player in the NRL has ever had. Let's just put that out there. That is a ridiculous points total. Now, their win streaks, two times they've hit 11 wins in a row. Between the 30th of July 1989 and the 25th of March 1990, they won 11 matches in a row. They equalled that between the 18th of September 1994 to the 7th of May 1995. So they've won 11 in a row twice. They've also lost 8 in a row twice. So this is their longest losing streaks. So the 28th of July 1985 to the 23rd of March 1986. Now this is a point where the Raiders aren't very good. This is just after they get their first wooden spoon in their inaugural season. A couple of years after, they really struggled early on. And then they became really good in the late 80s to the mid 90s. That's their dominant period. But before they became a winning team, they had to go through some growing pains in their early years down in the nation's capital in Australia. They also did this again in 2011. Between the 18th of March and the 14th of May 2011, they lost 8 in a row at the beginning of the 2011 season. That again was another bit of a low point for the team at that time. But they didn't get a wooden spoon. They only had the one, and that was in their inaugural season. So their records are very, very interesting. Quite similar in a way to the Brisbane Broncos, a team at roughly the same time in the 80s and 90s. They were the two teams to really beat in the from the late 80s to the early 90s. These were the two top dogs. These were the fashionable sides if you're a young kid growing up to support. Hence why I'm a Raiders fan. I fell in love with the Raiders in the early 90s as a young kid over here in the UK. We got the worldwide sport and cable TV. I fell in love with the Green Machine. I'm still a Green Machine tragic to this day, even though I'm a Pom. But some really interesting records. Some of Jarry Croker's records, like tries and points, they're going to stand for a very long time. Points in a season by Jarry Croker, I think, will stand for a long time. Now, Jordan Rapana's tries in a season record could potentially disappear. They've got some really talented young outside backs right now who are just scoring tries for fun in the 2025 season. So you could potentially see Jordan Rapana's tries in a season record disappear. Mal Meninga, for example, scoring 5 tries in a game. Records are there to be broken, but it stood for so long that when it does happen, or when it gets equalled or surpassed, which is very possible because point scoring has definitely gone up on average in the NRL than before. More points have been scored now than in previous years in this current era since 2020. I could see a handful of these records going, but the points total for Jarry Croker, I think, stands. There's no one in the Raiders roster right now that I think will overtake that. Points in a season, unless Jamal Fogarty really has a great second half to the season and the Raiders continue to score points for fun and win games, I think Jarry Croker's points in a season record stands as well. It stood for 9 years. But there we go. They could potentially beat some of their win streaks as well if they keep this momentum up. I think that 11 win streak, if this young team continues to develop and has a great second half to the season, that win streak could go as well. It's not, I wouldn't say it's the worst, and I wouldn't say it's the best win streak. We as we saw with the Broncos, they've got a slightly longer win streak. Their losing streak does surprise me, considering how bad they were in the early days of existence at only 8. There are some teams who, as I look at the Broncos, for example, they've got a longer losing streak record than the Raiders, and that does surprise me a little bit. But there we go. There's a quick look at the NRL records for the Canberra Raiders. Canterbury Bulldogs will be the next team that we look at in due course. But from me for now, thank you very much for watching. Please hit the like, subscribe, membership tab and leave your comments below, and I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.